Dylan Roof, who's been accused of killing 9 people in a nearby church, reportedly had not passed his background check when he got his gun. What is the harm in tightening standards for not only who buys guns, but those who sell them?
First of all, I'd like to recognize Governor Haley for her incredible leadership in the aftermath of the Emmanuel AME Church killings. I also want to recognize the people in that church that showed the grace of God and the grace of forgiveness and the mercy that they showed. I don't know if any of us could have done what they did one after another within 48 hours of that tragedy taking place. Look, here's the deal. In this particular case, the FBI made a mistake. The law itself requires a background check, but they didn't fulfill their part of the bargain within the time that they were supposed to do. We don't need to add new rules. We need to make sure the FBI does its job, because that person should not have gotten a gun. It would not have passed the background check. The first impulse of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton is to take rights away from law-abiding citizens. That's always what they do, whether it's the San Bernardino terrorist attack or if it's these tragedies that take place. I think we ought to focus on what the bigger issue is. It isn't law-abiding gun owners. Look, I have an A+ rating in the NRA, and we also have a reduction in gun violence because in Florida, if you commit a crime with a gun, you're going away. You're going away for a long, long while. And that's what we should focus on, is the violence in our communities. Target the efforts for people that are committing crimes with guns. And if you do that and get it right, you're going to be much better off than creating a political argument where there's a big divide. The other issue is mental health. That's a serious issue that we could work on. Republicans and Democrats alike believe this. The president's first impulse is to do this by executive order, power he doesn't have. Why not go to Congress and in a bipartisan way begin to deal with the process of mental health issues so that people that are spiraling out of control because of mental health challenges don't have access to guns?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trump, are there any circumstances that you think we should be limiting gun sales of any kind in America?
No. I am a Second Amendment person. If we had guns in California on the other side where the bullets went in the different direction, you wouldn't have 14 or 15 people dead right now. If even in Paris, if they had guns on the other side going in the opposite direction, you wouldn't have 130 people plus dead. So the answer is no. And what Jeb said is absolutely correct. We have a huge mental health problem in this country. We're closing hospitals, we're closing wards, we're closing so many because the states want to save money. We have to get back into looking at what's causing. You know, the guns don't pull the trigger. It's the people that pull the trigger. And we have to find out what is going on. We have to protect our Second Amendment, and you cannot do this, and certainly what Barack Obama was doing with the executive order. He doesn't want to get people together. You know, the old-fashioned way where you get Congress. You get the Congress, you get the Senate, you get together, you do legislation. He just writes out an order, executive order. Not supposed to happen that way.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Rubio, you've said that President Obama wants to take people's guns away, yet under his presidency, gun sales have more than doubled. That doesn't sound like a White House unfriendly to gun owners.
That sounds like people are afraid the president's going to take their guns away.
Of course.
Look, the Second Amendment is not an option. It is not a suggestion. It is a constitutional right of every American to be able to protect themselves and their families. I am convinced that if this president could confiscate every gun in America, he would. I am convinced that this president, if he could get rid of the Second Amendment, he would. I am convinced because I see how he works with his Attorney General, not to defend the Second Amendment, but to figure out ways to undermine it. I have seen him appoint people not to defend the Second Amendment, but to figure out ways to undermine it. Here's my second problem. None of these instances that the president points to as the reason why he's doing these things would have been prevented. You know why? Because criminals don't buy their guns from a gun show. They don't buy their guns from a collector. And they don't buy their guns from a gun store. They steal them. They get them on the black market. And let me tell you, ISIS and terrorists do not get their guns from a gun show. His answer, You name it. If there's an act of violence in America, his immediate answer before he even knows the facts is gun control. Here's a fact. We are in a war against ISIS. They are trying to attack us here in America. They attacked us in Philadelphia last week. They attacked us in San Bernardino 2 weeks ago. And the last line standing between them and our families might be us and a gun. When I'm President of the United States, we are defending the Second Amendment, not undermining it the way Barack Obama does.
But what fact can you point to, Senator? What fact can you point to that the president would take away everyone's gun? You don't think that's extreme?
About every 2 weeks he holds a press conference talking about how he can't wait to restrict people's access to guns. He has never defended law. I'll give you a fact. Well, let me tell you this. Do you remember when he ran for President of the United States and he was a candidate and he went and said, these Americans with traditional values, they are bitter people and they cling to their guns and to their religion. That tells you right away where he was headed on all of this. This president, every chance he has ever gotten, has tried to undermine the Second Amendment. He doesn't meet. Here's the difference. When he meets with the Attorney General in the White House, it's not, how can we protect the Second Amendment rights of Americans? It's, give me options on how I can make it harder for law-abiding people to buy guns. That will never happen when I am President of the United States.
Governor Christie, you too have criticized the president's recent executive action on gun control, saying it's unconstitutional, another step to bypass Congress. But hasn't your own position on guns evolved, sir? The New Jersey Star Ledger reports that you signed several laws to regulate the possession of firearms and that you argued back in August 2013, and I quote, "These common sense measures will strengthen New Jersey's already tough gun laws." So isn't that kind of what the president wants to do now?
No, absolutely not. The president wants to do things without working with his Congress, without working with the legislature, and without getting the consent of the American people. And the fact is that that's not a democracy, that's a dictatorship. And we need to be very, very concerned about that. See, here's the thing. I don't think the founders put the Second Amendment as number 2 by accident. I don't think they dropped all the amendments into a hat and picked them out of a hat. I think they made the Second Amendment because they thought it was just that important. And the fact is, in New Jersey, what we have done is to make it easier now to get a conceal and carry permit. We have made it easier to do that, not harder. And the way we've done it is properly through regulatory action, not by signing unconstitutional executive orders. This guy is a petulant child. That's what he is. I mean, you know, fact is, Neil, let's think about, and I hope the president's watching tonight, because here's what I'd like to tell him. Mr. President, we're not against you, we're against your policies. When you became president, you had a Democratic Congress and a filibuster-proof Democratic Senate. You had only 21 Republican governors in this country. And now, after 7 years of your policies, we have the biggest majority we've had since the 1920s in the House, a Republican majority in the Senate, and 31 out of 50 Republican governors. The American people have rejected your agenda, and now you're trying to go around it. That's not right. It's not constitutional. And we are going to kick your rear end out of the White House come this fall.
Senator Cruz, to stop mass shootings and violent crime up in 30 cities across the country?
The answer is simple. You prosecute criminals. You target the bad guys. You know, a minute ago, Neil asked, what has President Obama done to illustrate that he wants to go after guns? Well, he appointed Eric Holder as Attorney General. Eric Holder said he viewed his mission as brainwashing the American people against guns. He appointed Sonia Sotomayor to the Supreme Court, someone who has been a radical against the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. He launched Fast and Furious, illegally selling guns to Mexican drug lords that were then used to shoot law enforcement officials. And I'll tell you what Hillary Clinton has said. Hillary Clinton says she agrees with the dissenters, the Supreme Court dissenters in the Heller case. There were 4 dissenters, and they said that they believe the Second Amendment protects no individual right to keep and bear arms whatsoever, which means if their view prevailed and the next president's going to get 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 Supreme Court justices, the court will rule that not a single person in this room has any right under the Second Amendment, and the government could confiscate your guns. And I'll note that California's senator, Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein, said if she could say to Mr. America and Mrs. America, give me your guns, I'm rounding them up, she would. And let me make a final point on this. Listen, in any Republican primary, everyone is going to say they support the Second Amendment. unless you are clinically insane. That's what you say in a primary. But the voters are savvier than that. They recognize that people's actions don't always match their words. I've got a proven record fighting to defend the Second Amendment. There's a reason Gun Owners of America has endorsed me in this race. There's a reason the NRA gave me their Carter Knight Freedom Fund Award. And there's a reason when Barack Obama and Chuck Schumer came after our right to keep and bear arms that I led the opposition along with millions of Americans. We defeated that gun control legislation, and I would note the other individuals on this stage were nowhere to be found in that fight.
Senator, let me follow up and switch gears. Senator Cruz, you suggested Mr. Trump, quote, embodies New York values. Could you explain what you mean by that?
You know, I think most people know exactly what New York values are.
I am from New York.
Well, you're from New York, so you might not. But I promise you in the state of South Carolina, they do. And listen, there are many, many wonderful, wonderful working men and women in the state of New York. But everyone understands that the values in New York City are socially liberal or pro-abortion or pro-gay marriage, focused around money and the media. And I would note, indeed, the reason I said that is I was asked, my friend Donald has taken to at his events playing Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. And I was asked what I thought of that, and I said, well, if he wanted to play a song, maybe he could play New York, New York. And you know, the concept of New York values is not that complicated to figure out. Not too many years ago, Donald did a long interview with Tim Russert. And in that interview, he explained his views on a whole host of issues that were very, very different from the views he's describing now. And his explanation, he said, look, I'm from New York. That's what we believe in New York. Those aren't Iowa values, but this is what we believe in New York. And so that was his explanation. And I guess I can frame it another way. Not a lot of conservatives come out of Manhattan. I'm just saying.
Are you sure about that?
Maria? So, conservatives actually do come out of Manhattan, including William F. Buckley and others, just so you understand. And just so, if I could, because he insulted a lot of people, I've had more calls on that statement that Ted made. New York is a great place. It's got great people. It's got loving people, wonderful people. When the World Trade Center came down, I saw something that no place on earth could have handled more beautifully, more humanely than New York. You had two 110-story buildings come crashing down. I saw them come down. Thousands of people killed. And the cleanup started the next day, and it was the most horrific cleanup probably in the history of doing this and in construction. I was down there, and I've never seen anything like it. And the people in New York fought and fought and fought, and we saw more death, and even the smell of death. Nobody understood it, and it was with us for months, the smell, the air. And we rebuilt downtown Manhattan, and everybody in the world watched, and everybody in the world loved New York and loved New Yorkers. And I have to tell you, that was a very insulting statement that Ted made.
Governor Bush, for the third time in as many months, the Iranians have provoked us, detaining us, as we've been discussing with these 10 Navy sailors. Tehran has set straight into their waters. The sailors were later released, but only after being shown on video apologizing for the incident. This occurring only weeks after Iran fired multiple rockets within 1,500 yards of a U.S. aircraft carrier and then continued to test medium-range missiles. Now, you've claimed that such actions indicate Tehran has little to fear from a President Obama. I wonder, sir, what would change if they continued doing this sort of thing under President Jeb Bush?
Well, first of all, under President Jeb Bush, we would restore the strength of the military. Last week, Secretary Carter announced that the Navy is going to be cut again. It's now half the size of what it was prior to Operation Desert Storm. The deployments are too high for the military personnel. We don't have procurement being done for refreshing the equipment. The B-52 is still operational as the long-range bomber. It was inaugurated in the age of Harry Truman. The planes are older than the pilots. We're gutting our military, and so the Iranians and the Chinese and the Russians and many other countries look at the United States not as serious as we once were. We have to eliminate the sequester, rebuild our military in a way that makes it clear that we're back in the game. Secondly, as it relates to Iran, we need to confront their ambitions across the board. We should reimpose sanctions. They've already violated sanctions after this agreement was signed by testing medium-range missiles. Thirdly, we need to move our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to send a serious signal that we're back in the game with Israel, and sign an agreement that makes sure that the world knows that they will have technological superiority. We need to get back in the game as it relates to our Arab nations. The rest of the world is moving away from us towards other alliances because we are weak. This president and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton all have made it harder for the next president to act, but he must act to confront the ambitions of Iran. We can get back in the game to restore order and security for our own country.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Kasich, while everyone has been focusing on Iran's provocations, I'm wondering what you make of what Saudi Arabia has been doing and its recent moves in the region, including its execution of a well-known Shiite cleric and its move to dramatically increase oil production. Some say in an effort to drive down oil prices and force a lot of U.S. oil producers out of business. Sure enough, oil prices have tumbled. One brokerage house now is predicting a third or more of American oil producers and those heavily invested in fracking will go bankrupt. And soon Saudi Arabia and OPEC will be back in the driver's seat. U.S. energy player Harold Hamm recently told me, with friends like these, who needs enemies? Do you agree?
Well, let me first of all talk a little bit about my experience. I served on the Defense Committee for 18 years, and by the way, one of the members of that committee was Senator Strom Thurmond from South Carolina. Let me also tell you that after the 9/11 attacks, Secretary Rumsfeld invited me to the Pentagon with a meeting of the former Secretaries of Defense. And in that meeting, I suggested we had a problem with technology, and that I wanted to take people from Silicon Valley into the Pentagon to solve our most significant problems. So I not only had the opportunity to go through the Cold War struggles in Central America, and even after 9/11 to be involved. With Saudi Arabia and oil production, first of all, you know, it's so critical for us to be energy independent, and we're getting there because of fracking. And we ought to explore, because, see, energy independence gives us leverage and flexibility. And secondly, if you want to bring jobs back to the United States of America in industry, low prices make the difference. We're seeing it in my state, and we'll see it in this country. And that's why we must make sure that we continue to frack. In terms of Saudi Arabia, look, my biggest problem with them is they're funding radical clerics through their madrasas. That is a bad deal and an evil situation, and presidents have looked the other way. And I was going to tell you, whether I'm president or not, we better make it clear to the Saudis that we're going to support you, we're in relation with you, just like we were in the first Gulf War, but you've got to knock off the funding and teaching of radical clerics who are the very people who try to destroy us and will turn around and destroy them. So look, in foreign policy, it's strength, but you got to be cool. You got to have a clear vision of where you want to go. And I'm going to tell you that I'm going to suggest to you here tonight that you can't do on-the-job training. I've seen so much of it. A Soviet Union, the coming down of the wall, the issues that we saw around the world in Central America, the potential spread of communism, and 9/11, and the Gulf War. You see, with the Saudis, deliver them a strong message. But at the end of the day, we have to keep our cool, because most of the time they're going right with us, and they must be part of our coalition to destroy ISIS. And I believe we can get that done. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
There's much more ahead, including the fight against ISIS. More from North Charleston, South Carolina, when we come right back.